Hey guys, tonight we're stepping onto a creaky wooden deck in the middle of the age of exploration. You've probably seen romantic paintings of noble ships with billowing sails. But let me be honest with you, you probably won't survive this. The sea has no interest in your comfort, and you're about to find that out the hard way. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, I'd love to know where you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You climb aboard with nervous excitement. The wood beneath your boots groans, smelling of pitch and salt. Around you, men bark orders, ropes slap against the mast, and gulls wheel overhead. The idea of adventure lures you in, but the reality immediately makes itself known. The ship tilts with the tide, and you grab at a rail, realizing balance won't come easy here. The sea is alive. It's not a calm blue carpet. It's rolling and heaving, endless and intimidating. Waves slap against the hull with a steady rhythm, like a giant reminding you who's in charge. You imagine smooth sailing toward exotic lands, but sailors around you laugh at such notions. They know the ocean isn't a backdrop. It's the main character, and it's moody. From the first hour, you're shoved into work. Ropes must be coiled, sails adjusted, and water barrels hauled into place. Your hands blister before the sun has even set. You thought life at sea might mean staring at the horizon, but it's all hauling, scrubbing, and heaving. Historians still argue whether first-time sailors were broken in gently or thrown immediately into the hardest tasks. Judging by your aching back, the latter seems more accurate. As the days stretch, you start to understand why storms terrified entire crews. Even on a good day, the ocean rocks you like a cradle gone wrong, sudden dips, jolts, and stomach-churning rolls. Seasickness hits like betrayal, leaving you dizzy, green, and dry heaving over the rail. Old hands joke that you'll never stop being sick, and maybe they're right. It's not uncommon for new sailors to be so dehydrated and weakened from vomiting that they collapse on deck. Then there's the weather. One moment the sky is bright, gulls gliding peacefully. The next, clouds muscle in, heavy and dark. Rain lashes down, soaking your clothes, and the wind claws at your skin. The sails crack like thunder, ropes snap tight, and men scream above the storm. You cling to a beam, praying not to be washed away. Quirky details filter in through the misery. For example, some sailors swore by chewing on ginger root to calm nausea, while others swore equally strongly that biting a chunk of rope worked better. Neither helps much, but at least it gives you something to focus on besides your stomach. Food doesn't comfort you either. You bite into your first biscuit and nearly break a tooth. It's hard, dry, and filled with little black specks. Someone jokes that the specks are raisins. Then one moves. They're not raisins. You decide not to eat after all, but hunger will wear you down until you do. Sleep is barely better. You're assigned a hammock, slung so close to the next man's that your elbows brush in the night. The ship's rocking means you sway constantly, sometimes gently, sometimes violently. Dreams blur into the creak of timbers and the splash of waves against the hull. When you wake, it's not to morning birdsong, but to the shout of an officer, ordering you back to work. Still, there's something strange about it all. In rare quiet moments, you look out at the horizon, nothing but water in every direction. It's terrifying, yes, but there's also an odd calm in it. The sea has a rhythm, and if you let yourself drift with it, your mind slows, your eyelids grow heavy, and you almost forget the misery. But you're never really safe. The ocean is a fickle host. A storm can rise in minutes, and you realize that no amount of training can prepare you for the raw power of wind and wave. Ancient sailors whispered that the sea was alive, hungry for men's lives, and you begin to wonder if they were right. You wake up stiff and groggy, realizing you never really slept. The hammock cradled you, but not kindly. It felt more like being suspended in a swinging sack of discomfort. You roll out and bump straight into another sailor who grunts and shoves past. Privacy? Forget it. On this ship, you're never alone. The quarters are tight, the air is thick with sweat, tar, and unwashed bodies, and there's nowhere to retreat. The space below deck is dim, lit only by weak lanterns that sway with every roll of the ship. Shadows stretch and dance across rough beams, and the smell hits you before your eyes adjust. Damp wood, mold, stale air, and the unmistakable stink of too many men crammed into too little space. You pull in a breath and it tastes like brine and old leather. Your hammock is slung so close to the next man's that you know more about your shipmate's snoring patterns than you ever wanted. When someone turns, the whole line of hammocks sways. If one man thrashes in his sleep, you all feel it. There's no door to close, no curtain to draw, just rows of bodies hanging in canvas slings, like meat in a smokehouse. You quickly notice the constant shuffle of bodies. Someone's always stepping over you, always dropping something, always elbowing past. At night, there's the symphony of coughing, groaning, and teeth grinding. Someone mutters prayers, another whispers curses. One poor soul cries quietly, and no one acknowledges it. You pretend not to hear too. Historians still argue whether the crew was deliberately packed in this tightly for efficiency, or simply because ships weren't designed with comfort in mind. Either way, the result is the same. You have no personal space, no belongings beyond what fits in a small chest, and no escape. Even the captain, with his private quarters, doesn't live in luxury. His walls creak with the same ocean groans. His bedding is damp like yours, and rats don't respect rank. And the rats, oh, the rats. You see one scuttle across a beam, tail whipping, as bold as if it owns the place. In truth, it kind of does. They're everywhere, thriving in the dark corners. You feel something brush your foot in the night, and you hope it's just a rope. It isn't. Sometimes the men try to make a joke of it. They'll race rats across the deck when the officers aren't watching, betting scraps of food on the outcome. Quirky, yes, but you can't help wondering what diseases are hitching a ride in their fur. Fleas are constant companions, and lice practically come with the uniform. And speaking of uniforms, there aren't any. You wear the same clothes day in and day out. They're stiff with salt, ragged at the edges, and they smell like, well, they smell like you. There's no bath, no laundry, just the occasional rinse in seawater that leaves your skin dry and cracked. Your hair mats to your head, your teeth feel furry, and your skin itches constantly. When you crawl back into your hammock after another endless day of hauling ropes, you almost envy the rats. At least they can find some dark, quiet corner to hide. You just lie there, shoulder pressed against shoulder, your body rocking with the ship, waiting for sleep to come, if it comes at all. Still, there's a strange intimacy in this crowding. You begin to know the rhythms of the men around you, the sound of their laughter, the cadence of their sighs. In a world this cramped, you build a strange kind of family, not by choice but by necessity. You cling to it because without it, you're just one more body in a sea of faces, waiting for the ocean to swallow you. The morning light creeps in, but it doesn't bring much relief. You drag yourself onto the deck, stomach grumbling, only to be greeted by the cook's cheery announcement, breakfast. You brace yourself, because you already know that word means something different out here. No eggs, no bread, no fresh fruit, just a slab of salted beef that smells like leather soaked in brine, and a hard biscuit so solid it could double as a weapon. You pick up the biscuit, officially called hardtack, and immediately spot the tiny black dots. At first you think it's just burned flour. Then one of the dots wiggles. A weevil pokes its head out like it owns the place. You hesitate, but the older sailors shrug. They say the bugs are extra protein. You try to ignore it, breaking the biscuit and shaking out as many as you can before forcing down a mouthful that grinds against your teeth. The salted meat isn't any better. The curing process keeps it from rotting, but it leaves the flesh so tough that chewing it feels like gnawing on rope. You chew and chew, your jaw aching, and finally swallow with a gulp of stale beer. That's right, beer for breakfast. Fresh water is too risky, stored in wooden casks that quickly turn slimy and foul. Beer lasts longer, though it sours and thickens with age. You raise the mug, take a sip, and fight back a grimace. Historians still argue whether sailors preferred beer or watered-down wine on these voyages, but one thing's certain, neither tasted good after weeks at sea. By the end of a long journey, the liquid could be more dangerous than thirst itself. You can't help wondering if you're slowly poisoning yourself sip by sip. Occasionally, when you're lucky, the cook serves up dried peas or a thin porridge. It's bland, but at least it goes down easier than hardtack. Every now and then, you might even get a slice of cheese, though it's usually crawling with maggots. The men say you should just eat around them. You try not to think about it. There are quirky workarounds too. Some sailors dunk their hardtack in beer to soften it, creating a kind of mushy paste they call burgoo. Others toast it over a lantern flame until it's charred black, claiming the smoke kills the bugs. You attempt the latter, only to end up with something that tastes like burnt sawdust. Still, it beats crunching live insects. You hear rumors about captains feasting on fresh bread, meat, even wine. Maybe some do, but you see little evidence here. The officers' portions are slightly better, maybe less wormy, but nobody's living in luxury. This is survival food, not comfort food. Every bite reminds you that the ship is a world cut off from the land, where supplies dwindle, spoil, and betray you. As the voyage stretches, the rations grow worse. The biscuits crumble into dust, the meat turns slimier, and the beer tastes like vinegar. Hunger gnaws at you anyway, so you keep eating. Sometimes you catch yourself staring at a rat and wondering, well, let's just say you're not the first sailor to think about it. When you finally push the empty plate away, your stomach is only half satisfied. You lean back, wiping crumbs from your lips, and watch as another sailor smashes a biscuit against the table just to break it. It shatters into jagged chunks, scattering weevils like sparks. No one laughs. You're all too tired, too hungry, too aware that tomorrow's meal will be exactly the same. By the time you head back on duty, the salty aftertaste still clings to your tongue. You realize that food, instead of bringing joy, is just another burden to endure. And yet, in the strangest way, the routine becomes part of you. Bite, chew, swallow, grimace, repeat. The rhythm is as steady as the sea. The days blur into one another, and soon the food isn't your biggest problem. It's your body. You start to feel strange. Your gums swell. Your teeth ache, and your skin bruises at the lightest bump. You think maybe it's just fatigue, but the older sailors recognize it immediately. Scurvy, the dreaded curse of long voyages. Without fresh fruits or vegetables, your body is starving for vitamin C, though no one aboard knows it by that name. Instead, they just know your teeth might loosen and fall out. Your wounds won't heal, and your strength will seep away until you're little more than a husk. You hear whispers about men's gums rotting and their legs swelling so badly they can't stand. The cook mutters about lemon juice being the cure, but lemons are a faraway luxury. On this ship, you're out of luck. You're not alone in your misery. Coughs echo through the quarters. Some men shake with fevers, drenched in sweat, while others lie still, eyes glazed, barely responding. Disease spreads like wildfire in these cramped conditions. Dysentery is common, leaving men too weak to stand. You see buckets hauled up from below deck, the stench almost unbearable. You try not to imagine how quickly germs move from one hand to another. Historians still argue whether sanitation was deliberately neglected because of ignorance or because it was simply impossible at sea. Either way, the outcome is the same. Sickness thrives. The surgeon, if your ship is lucky enough to have one, offers little more than bloodletting, herbal concoctions, or cauterization with a red-hot iron. His cabin smells of rot, and few men willingly go there unless desperation forces them. Then there are the mysterious illnesses, fevers with no clear source, a rash that spreads up a man's arms, sudden seizures that leave even the bravest hardened sailors rattled. You listen to the whispers. Maybe it's bad air, maybe it's curses, maybe it's the wrath of the sea gods. Whatever the cause, the effect is chilling. You realize that once you fall truly ill, there's almost no coming back. Yet in the middle of this misery, sailors develop quirks to cope. Some swear by chewing on tar-soaked ropes to keep their teeth strong. Others claim that drinking seawater in small doses wards off fever, though that usually ends badly. You watch one man gulp a mouthful of seawater, only to spend the next day doubled over. Still, desperation makes people cling to anything. You try to distract yourself from the sickness by staring at the endless horizon. The sea looks so vast, so clean, so full of life. Dolphins leap alongside the ship sometimes, their sleek bodies glinting in the sun. A sailor jokes that if you could catch one, its liver would cure your gums. Another swears by eating raw fish eyes. You're not sure whether to laugh or gag. Nights are the hardest. In the dark, the coughing feels louder, the groans heavier. Someone mutters prayers for a dying shipmate, and the sound drills into your bones. You can't escape it, not even in sleep. You lie in your hammock, swaying with the ship, listening to the rhythm of sickness all around you. And yet, somehow, you endure. Maybe you're too stubborn, maybe too lucky, or maybe the sea hasn't chosen you yet. Either way, you pull yourself up every morning, brush off the aches, and keep working. Because here, sickness isn't just misery. It's the reminder that the voyage itself is a gamble, and every sunrise you see is a victory. By now you've realized that life at sea isn't about adventure or glory. It's about chores. Endless, back-breaking, bone-aching chores. You trudge across the deck, dragging heavy ropes, coiling lines, tightening sails, and adjusting rigging that seems to have a mind of its own. Every muscle protests, and yet there's no pause. If you stop, the ship doesn't forgive. The captain's voice carries over the wind, sharp and commanding. "Hoist the mizzen! Reef the mainsail!" And suddenly, everyone moves as one, hauling and tugging, knees bent, arms strained. You wonder if these orders are designed to keep you busy or simply to punish. Some historians still argue that long periods of work at sea were meant to prevent idleness from causing mutiny. But it doesn't feel like a safety measure. It feels like survival. Meals are interruptions in the workflow, short breaks to stuff your stomach before being yanked back to labor. You wash down hardtack with the bitter beer you've grown used to, then slide back into rope-laden decks. The ropes are rough, fraying under your fingers, sometimes snapping and taking your knuckles with them. Every day, your hands grow more calloused, blistered and bloody, yet somehow you keep moving. Even when the wind is gentle, chores never end. Decks must be swabbed to keep the slime at bay, sails inspected, cargo secured, barrels checked for leaks. Every knot must be tight, every plank dry, or disaster can strike. A loose sail can tear, a slipping line can snap a mast, and you're the one caught in the middle when it does. There's a rhythm to it, though. At first it's punishing and chaotic, but slowly you find a cadence. The sea, the crew, the ropes, they start to sync with your body. You can almost feel the ship breathe beneath your feet. It's still exhausting, but there's a strange comfort in the predictability of it. Quirky rituals develop to break the monotony. Sailors will race up the rigging, challenging one another to reach the crow's nest first, though everyone ends up breathless and dizzy. Some hum tunes, others chant old sailor rhymes that echo across the deck. You join in reluctantly at first, but the rhythm keeps your mind off aching muscles. Yet, despite camaraderie, danger lurks in every task. A misstep can send you sprawling across the deck or overboard. You learn quickly to respect the rope, the sails, and the balance of the ship. Even a small mistake might result in bruises or broken bones, or worse, swallowed by the merciless sea. As you trudge from one chore to the next, your body becomes a map of fatigue. Every joint screams, every finger aches, every back muscle protests, yet you keep going. Pain becomes your companion, as constant as the waves, as inevitable as the tide. And strangely, you begin to find pride in it. It's a cruel, relentless life, but mastering the chores is survival. Each knot tied perfectly, each sail adjusted correctly, each deck swabbed clean. It's proof you belong on this vessel, even if the ocean itself doesn't agree. You peer at the horizon, hoping for a glimpse of land, but all you see is endless water. Navigation is another puzzle, one that doesn't forgive mistakes. You handle the compass and charts with care, yet even the slightest miscalculation can send the ship hundreds of miles off course. Sailors whisper about the perils of misreading the stars, and you start to understand why those whispers are persistent. The sextant, that small brass instrument, becomes your lifeline. You align it carefully, measuring angles between the horizon and celestial bodies. Your calculations must be precise, or you risk sailing into uncharted waters. Historians still argue whether early navigators relied more on instruments or instinct, but as you trace the horizon, you realize both were needed and often failed. The maps are crude by modern standards. Coastlines are approximate, rivers are misdrawn, and many islands are misplaced. You hold the parchment tightly, knowing that one small error could mean weeks lost at sea, or worse. You begin to respect the cartographers who worked with incomplete knowledge to create guides that would dictate life or death. At night, the stars become your companions. You memorize constellations and use them to estimate your latitude. There's a rhythm to this task: measure, record, calculate, adjust. The older sailors claim they can feel the currents, anticipate the winds, and sometimes steer by intuition alone. You try to follow, but more often than not, you second-guess every decision. Currents, tides, and hidden reefs are unpredictable threats. Even the best navigators can misjudge them, sending the ship into shallow waters or dangerous shoals. You hear stories of vessels wrecked on unseen rocks, crews stranded, supplies lost, and entire missions ruined. It's a constant reminder that the sea has its own agenda. Quirky habits develop among sailors to aid navigation. Some chant rhymes to remember star positions, others tap the deck to the rhythm of the waves, claiming it helps sync with the ocean's mind. You try not to scoff, though secretly these small routines give comfort. You follow along, mimicking gestures, feeling slightly less vulnerable. Fog and storms complicate navigation further. A thick mist can hide treacherous rocks, and a sudden storm can obliterate the horizon. You cling to the rigging, eyes scanning, hoping instruments are enough. Sometimes they aren't, and you brace for the inevitable, scraping against unseen obstacles or being tossed by waves. Despite the danger, there are moments of wonder. Bioluminescent plankton light up the night water, stars blaze like diamonds, and you glimpse distant birds marking hidden land. These glimpses remind you why sailors endure. The promise of discovery, even in the midst of misery, keeps your mind focused and your body moving. The balance between awe and fear becomes your daily rhythm. You measure, calculate, observe, and hope. Every day is a lesson in humility, reminding you that the ocean is vast, instruments are limited, and human skill is only part of the equation. Discipline on board is as unyielding as the ocean itself. You quickly learn that rules aren't suggestions, they're survival mechanisms, enforced with a severity that would make modern HR departments faint. Sailors who disobey orders risk lashings, confinement, or being sent aloft during storms as punishment. You glance nervously at the officer watching from the quarterdeck, realizing that even minor mistakes can carry disproportionate consequences. The captain's word is law, and his moods swing like the tide. A reprimand might be harsh but brief, or it might extend into days of grueling labor. Historians still argue whether harsh discipline was designed to maintain order or simply to break spirits. But as you scrub the deck under the scorching sun, it feels more like both. You witness a sailor caught stealing rations. The captain commands him to stand in the sun for hours, arms raised, back straight. Every movement is monitored, every groan noted. The lesson is clear: survival requires obedience. Mutiny is whispered about in the shadows, but you see the fear it inspires. No one speaks its name aloud. Even so, life isn't devoid of small freedoms. Brief lulls allow for whispered jokes, storytelling, and quiet camaraderie. You hear legends of men who sang shanties while working, their voices rising above the wind. You try a few lines yourself, your voice hoarse, the rhythm awkward, but it offers a fleeting sense of normalcy. Corporal punishment is only part of the discipline. There are subtler forms too. Men who fall behind in their tasks receive pointed stares, grumbling assignments, or social ostracism. Sailors are constantly reminded that personal failings can endanger everyone. One slip, one missed knot, and the ship itself might pay the price. The officer's expectations extend into every aspect of life aboard. Your hammock must be tied perfectly, belongings stowed efficiently, clothes maintained as best as possible given the circumstances. Even the tiniest infraction draws attention. You notice how seasoned sailors move with precision, almost dancing around orders, while newcomers fumble and get punished. Experience matters. Quirky coping mechanisms emerge under such pressure. Some sailors invent hand signals to communicate silently, avoiding extra attention from the officers. Others leave small talismans or charms tucked in their hammocks, hoping to curry favor with luck rather than men. You adopt a tiny carving from a piece of driftwood, not fully believing it will help, but comforted that you have something personal in a world dominated by rules. Mutiny is a constant specter, whispered about in dimly lit corners of the ship. Some dream of overthrowing the captain or reshaping authority, but few act. Fear keeps men in line more effectively than ropes or lashings ever could. And you realize, with each passing day, that obedience isn't just about avoiding punishment, it's about surviving a world where the ocean is indifferent, and humans are the only ones enforcing order. The balance of fear and camaraderie is delicate. You learn to read faces, predict moods, and navigate human behavior as carefully as you do the ship's course. It's exhausting, but necessary, because in this environment, a lapse in discipline is often indistinguishable from a lapse in survival. Storms are the sea's way of reminding you who really rules. One moment the sky is clear, a gentle breeze pushing the sails along, and the next, dark clouds roll in like an army on the horizon. The wind howls, waves rise, and you cling to whatever solid wood you can find, stomach churning as the ship tosses violently. Lightning splits the sky, illuminating terrified faces, creaking masts, and whipping ropes. Rain lashes your skin, cold and unrelenting. Every deck plank becomes slick, and every handhold a potential hazard. Historians still argue whether wooden ships were ever truly seaworthy in violent storms, but standing on the deck, soaked to the bone, and gripping a rope for dear life, you realize it doesn't matter. The storm will challenge you regardless. The crew scrambles to adjust sails, secure cargo, and prevent the ship from capsizing. Orders fly over the chaos. Reef the mainsail, secure the mizzen, hold fast. You pull at ropes with a strength you didn't know you had, muscles screaming, knuckles raw. Water gushes over the deck, soaking you from head to toe. Every step is a gamble. One slip could mean being swept overboard. Fear is constant, but so is camaraderie. You rely on your fellow sailors, just as they rely on you. A misstep not only endangers yourself, but the entire crew. Someone falls and another hauls him back up, drenched and exhausted. You take comfort in the rhythm of coordinated effort, though your mind races with what-ifs. Peculiar behaviors emerge in storms. Superstitious sailors mutter prayers to sea gods or toss coins into the waves for protection. Some refuse to whistle, convinced it will summon a gust strong enough to capsize the ship. Others carry charms tucked into clothing, hoping they'll remain untouched by the wrath of nature. You do neither, but you can't stop yourself from gripping a small talisman given by an older sailor, just in case. The ship groans under the storm. Masts bend, rigging strains, and water floods the lower decks. Every creak is amplified, every crash of waves against wood a drumbeat of impending disaster. You cling to a rail, bracing against the pull of the rolling sea. At times the fear is so intense that you feel your heart pound in your throat, imagining the moment the hull breaks and you're swallowed by the abyss. Oddly, amidst this chaos there's a hypnotic rhythm, the repetitive crash of waves, the chorus of shouts, the snapping of ropes. It lulls your mind into a strange trance. For brief moments, panic is replaced by focus. Terror becomes almost meditative. You marvel at how fear and fascination coexist, like two currents running parallel through your veins. When the storm finally abates, the crew is soaked, exhausted, and bruised. You collapse against a coil of rope, shivering, yet strangely elated. Survival in the face of nature's fury brings a grim satisfaction. The ocean has reminded you of its power, but you have endured. You begin to notice the smaller horrors lurking aboard the ship, ones that aren't as dramatic as storms, but equally relentless. Rats scuttle across the deck and below, nibbling at scraps and gnawing at whatever they can reach. Fleas and lice are constant companions, hopping from sailor to sailor, carrying disease and itching in places you didn't know could itch. You scratch endlessly, sometimes until your skin is raw, and still they persist. The hammocks are infested. You try shaking them out, but for every rat you see, another 3 are hiding. One sailor swears he saw a rat drink from his cup of beer. Another claims a rat chewed through his shirt while he slept. You begin to suspect the rodents are running the ship behind the scenes, judging by how bold they are. Pests aside, you notice the smell that clings to everything. Clothes never dry fully, food stinks before it's eaten, and even the officers' cabins carry a faint, unpleasant aroma. Some men attempt to mask it with herbs or tar, but the scent seeps into your hair and skin, as persistent as the sea itself. You find yourself resigning to it, realizing it will never go away entirely. Sanitation is a practical impossibility. Buckets for human waste are placed in corners, but even with careful aim, spills are inevitable. The lower decks are damp, often flooded with a mix of seawater and muck. Historians still argue whether early sailors had any real chance of maintaining hygiene, or if it was doomed from the start. As you scrub the deck and your own hands, you know firsthand that hygiene is largely a dream. Quirky coping mechanisms appear, some hilarious in hindsight. Sailors sprinkle sand over the floor to soak up moisture and mask smells. Others make crude games out of pest hunting, tossing rats into barrels or racing them along beams. You join in once, finding a brief, absurd distraction in an otherwise miserable life. The rats and lice are not just annoyances, they're vectors for disease. Outbreaks of dysentery, typhus, and other illnesses are common. You witness men weakened by constant bites and infections, lying listlessly in hammocks, unable to move without assistance. Some never recover fully, their strength sapped by weeks or months of shared misery. Even food attracts pests. Hardtack, salted meat, and occasional cheese all have companions, little critters that live undetected until your first bite. Some sailors try to ignore them, others toss the food in frustration, and a few accept the extra protein with grim resignation. You choose a mix of disgust and pragmatism, knowing starvation is a harsher reality than bugs in biscuits. Despite it all, life continues. You wake, work, eat, and sleep, or try to, in this infested, cramped, unrelenting world. The constant presence of pests is a reminder that the ship is not just a vessel for travel. It is an ecosystem all its own. You learn to coexist, adapt, and survive, grudgingly respecting the resilience of creatures that thrive where humans struggle. At last, land appears on the horizon. The sight is almost surreal after weeks or months of endless water. You approach a foreign harbor, and the ship's pace slows as the crew prepares to dock. There's excitement in the air, but it's tempered by exhaustion and caution. Every port has its dangers, and your survival so far doesn't guarantee safety once you step ashore. The smell changes instantly. Salt and brine are replaced by unfamiliar scents, spices, smoke, animals, and the odd bouquet of foreign markets. Vendors shout in languages you don't understand, and children dart between your feet as merchants haggle with animated gestures. You trudge through cobbled streets, aware that one misstep could lead to lost belongings, theft, or even confrontation with local authorities. Historians still argue how often early sailors were welcomed as allies versus treated as intruders. From your perspective, both are true. Some locals greet you with curiosity, others with suspicion. You realize quickly that manners, gifts, or bribes can make the difference between a peaceful day in port and a skirmish that ends badly. Quirky details stand out immediately. Exotic fruits you've never seen before tempt you, but you hesitate. You've heard stories of sailors falling ill after sampling local delicacies. You watch others taste mangoes, pineapples, or nuts that grow only in distant lands. Some declare them delicious, while others clutch their stomachs in regret. You tread carefully. Trade is everywhere. Sailors barter for cloth, spices, tools, or small luxuries like tobacco or sugar. You trade a bit of your own rations, or perhaps a trinket from home, and marvel at the different currencies and customs. Everything feels alien and fascinating, yet exhausting. You realize that survival at sea requires not just strength, but adaptability, learning local customs quickly, avoiding offense and spotting potential threats. The harbor itself is a complex ecosystem. Ships of all shapes and sizes crowd the docks, some flying flags you recognize, others entirely foreign. Sounds of hammering, rope creaking, and shouted orders fill the air. Rats scamper among crates and barrels, undeterred by the busy human traffic. You see old friends from your own vessel laugh at encounters with rival crews, trading stories of past mishaps and near disasters. And then there's the danger. Thieves, pickpockets, and opportunists lurk in every shadow. Sailors unfamiliar with the port often become targets. You clutch your few possessions tightly, your senses heightened, recalling the lessons of life at sea. Trust no one fully, but maintain politeness enough to avoid unnecessary conflict. Despite all this, there's beauty too. Markets filled with vibrant textiles, colorful spices piled high, and the aroma of cooking fires drifting across the harbor. You catch glimpses of local celebrations or religious rituals, their music, laughter, and chants painting a vivid tapestry that contrasts sharply with the bleak routine of life aboard your ship. In these fleeting moments, you remember why explorers endure so much misery. Each port, each encounter, each strange sight is a reminder of the vastness and variety of the world. You soak it in quietly, knowing that soon you'll return to the relentless rhythm of the sea, but carrying with you a few memories of something more vivid than salt, sweat, and work. You set sail again, leaving the bustling harbor behind. The calm sea seems almost welcoming after the chaos of port, but you know it's a temporary reprieve. Stories ripple through the crew, tales of pirates, rival empires, and even sea monsters that lurk in the deep. You try to laugh at the stories, but a small knot of unease settles in your stomach. Pirates are real enough, and the fear they inspire keeps sailors on edge. Ships can be ambushed in the blink of an eye, with boarding parties swinging aboard from ropes, swords drawn, and faces painted with menace. You keep a careful eye on the horizon, scanning every shadow that might conceal sails, knowing that vigilance can mean life or death. Rival empires also pose a threat. Flags of other nations flutter in the distance, signaling potential conflict over trade routes or disputed territories. Diplomacy at sea is limited to signaling with flags or cannons, and misunderstandings can escalate quickly. You hear whispers of ships sunk over a single misread gesture, crews imprisoned, and fortunes lost. Historians still argue whether reports of sea monsters were mere exaggerations or misidentified marine life. Either way, the sailors aboard your ship treat every strange sight with caution. Shadows beneath the waves, floating debris, or massive schools of fish sometimes trigger tense moments as superstitions mix with reason to heighten anxiety. You find that storytelling is a vital survival tool. Men gather in small groups, sharing tales of encounters at sea. Some are cautionary, teaching lessons about vigilance and skill. Others are exaggerated, bordering on absurd, meant to break monotony and keep fear manageable. You listen, captivated and slightly unnerved, realizing that these narratives bind the crew together, providing both entertainment and instruction. Quirky traditions persist. Sailors might toss a coin overboard for luck, whistle a tune to ward off spirits, or perform small rituals before passing certain waters. You join in half-heartedly at first, but the repetition brings a strange comfort. Even if it does nothing, the sense of control, however illusory, helps you cope with the vast, unpredictable ocean. Encounters with other ships are tense. You practice signaling with flags and lanterns, learning the codes that could mean friendship or conflict. Miscommunication can escalate quickly, and you remember that diplomacy at sea is precarious and fleeting. A smile from one captain can prevent a fight. A misread gesture can invite one. Despite the danger, you witness moments of awe. Dolphins dart around the bow, flying fish leap across the deck, and sunsets paint the sky in impossible colors. You notice the quiet strength of the sailors, working in unison, navigating threats both natural and human. The rhythm of survival continues, punctuated by brief glimpses of beauty and wonder, reminding you why this perilous life is endured. Superstitions weave themselves into daily life at sea, and you quickly notice that even the most practical sailors cling to them. You pass a man carefully tying a rabbit's foot to his belt, muttering prayers under his breath. Others avoid whistling on deck, believing the wind will interpret it as a challenge and summon a storm. You shake your head at first, but after a few near misses with bad weather, you start to understand why these rituals persist. Omens are everywhere. A bird flying in a certain pattern might mean luck or disaster. Sailors interpret strange colors in the sky or sudden shifts in the wind as warnings. Historians still argue how much these beliefs influence decisions versus being mere coincidence, but at the time, every precaution, rational or not, is taken seriously. You tuck a small charm into your shirt, more to quiet your own nerves than out of real faith. Certain days hold more weight than others. Friday is unlucky, and many sailors refuse to start a new task or voyage on that day. Stepping on deck with your left foot first is frowned upon. Spilling salt draws curses, while tossing coins to the waves might appease unseen spirits. You can't help but chuckle, though you find yourself following some of these routines subconsciously. Animals are also part of superstition. Cats on board are thought to protect against storms and keep rats in check. You notice a sleek black cat weaving between your feet, and you pause to admire it, realizing that, whether by luck or instinct, it is indeed a companion in this harsh environment. Dreams and visions are interpreted seriously too. Men claim that recurring nightmares predict storms or encounters with rival ships. You lie in your hammock, staring at the creaking beams above, wondering if last night's dream of drowning in a tidal wave is a warning. The older sailors nod knowingly, as if they've seen it all before. Quirks extend to daily behavior. Some sailors refuse to wash on certain days, believing it will wash away luck. Others tie knots a certain number of times to prevent disaster. You join in these rituals reluctantly, but you admit the routines bring a strange sense of control in a world where control is nearly impossible. Even prayers are strategic. Sailors mutter appeals to saints, gods, or the ocean itself. Some whisper for safe passage, others for protection against disease or pirates. You notice that the act of speaking these prayers, even half-heartedly, reduces tension across the deck. It's not magic, it's morale. Over time, these superstitions shape your perception of the sea. Every gust of wind, every sudden wave, every bird overhead carries layered meanings. You learn to anticipate events, whether by skill, experience, or sheer adherence to ritual. And slowly, you understand that superstition is more than belief. It's a survival mechanism, a collective wisdom shaped by countless voyages where ignoring warning signs could be fatal. Amid the relentless labor, storms, and superstitions, you begin to notice small pockets of relief, rare moments that feel almost like escape. Sailors sing shanties while hauling ropes, their voices weaving together, rising above the creak of wood and the splash of waves. You join in, hesitant at first, but soon your voice blends with the others, carrying over the water and giving you a fleeting sense of normalcy. Storytelling is another form of escape. At night, huddled in the hammocks, men share tales from home, from previous voyages, or from the imagination. Some are cautionary, teaching lessons about the sea. Others are exaggerated, bordering on the ridiculous. You listen, wide-eyed, and for a brief time, the ship feels less like a floating prison and more like a small community sharing laughter and fear. Games emerge in the downtime, small competitions to break monotony. Sailors challenge each other to climb the rigging fastest, balance on rolling beams, or toss coins into barrels. The stakes are minor, maybe a few scraps of food or bragging rights, but they bring levity to the otherwise grim routine. You participate, heart racing, adrenaline mixing with exhaustion, and for a moment, the aches and blisters fade from your mind. You notice the importance of camaraderie. Shared hardships create bonds that can't be broken easily. You begin to anticipate the gestures, the jokes, the unspoken signals among the crew. There's a strange comfort in knowing someone has your back, even if it's only to pull you up from a slip or steady a rope. The rhythm of trust develops slowly, intertwined with sweat, fatigue, and shared meals of questionable quality. Historians still debate whether this social cohesion was necessary for survival or merely a byproduct of isolation. Either way, you notice it shaping every interaction. Mutiny is rare, partly because the crew learns to rely on each other, and partly because fear and discipline keep everyone in line. The arts, even in tiny forms, offer brief relief. One sailor sketches landscapes on scraps of parchment, capturing distant coasts or imagined cities. Another carves small figures from driftwood, intricate enough to marvel at, despite your aching hands. These creative outlets, though modest, remind you that humanity persists, even in the harshest environments. You also observe moments of personal reflection. Staring at the endless horizon, you contemplate home, dreams, and the strange duality of fear and awe. The ocean teaches patience, humility, and resilience, even as it punishes mistakes mercilessly. These moments are fleeting, but they anchor you amidst chaos. By the end of such rare respites, you feel both exhausted and oddly rejuvenated. The weight of the ship, the work, the superstitions and the dangers remain, but these small moments of escape, singing, storytelling, games, and reflection, remind you why sailors endure. Survival at sea isn't just about strength, it's about finding brief joys and clinging to them. Time aboard the ship becomes an abstract concept. Days blur into nights, weeks into months, and you lose track of the exact count. The sun rises and sets, but without a proper calendar, your sense of time is dictated by meals, duties, and the rhythm of the waves. You notice sailors marking days with small notches on wood or tallying coins, a feeble attempt to hold on to reality. Sleep remains elusive. Hammocks sway constantly, and every creak or groan of the ship can jerk you awake. You count knots in ropes, hum shanties softly to yourself, or stare at the ceiling, hoping for fatigue to eventually override discomfort. Historians still argue whether early sailors developed permanent insomnia from extended voyages, and you begin to believe the claims. Nights are long, filled with muted sounds of coughing, snoring, and occasional whispers. Monotony becomes another adversary. The repetitive tasks, coiling ropes, scrubbing decks, adjusting sails, can erode morale if left unchecked. To cope, sailors invent minor diversions. You notice races to climb the rigging, challenges to identify constellations, and whispered games with coins or dice. These small acts, though trivial, break the monotony and provide the illusion of agency in a life so dictated by circumstance. Isolation is palpable, even among the crowded quarters. You can feel the mental strain of being cooped up with the same faces, voices, and smells day after day. Small irritations, an accidental elbow, a grunt in the wrong moment, become magnified, and arguments flare over seemingly trivial matters. Yet, these conflicts are short-lived, because survival demands cooperation. Food continues to challenge both body and mind. Hardtack and salted meat remain staples, occasionally interrupted by a meager treat of dried fruit or beer. You find yourself savoring even the smallest improvements, noting the taste and texture with an intensity born of deprivation. Each meal, no matter how unappetizing, is a reminder that life persists and that endurance is rewarded, however modestly. Quirks and routines evolve. You develop personal strategies for comfort, tightening your hammock just so, lining your shoes with cloth to avoid blisters, or arranging personal items to preserve a sense of order. Rituals, superstitions, and small habits intertwine with these strategies, creating a fragile web of control in a world largely dictated by the sea and its whims. Even leisure carries a layer of tension. Reading a worn journal, sketching a ship on rough parchment, or simply watching the horizon can soothe your mind, but the underlying dangers remain. Every wave, sudden gust, or shadow in the water reminds you that safety is temporary. The interplay of danger, routine, and fleeting beauty defines life aboard. And still you persist. You rise with the sun, fight fatigue, endure hunger, navigate storms and obey orders, all while holding on to these small acts of normalcy. The ship has become both prison and classroom, teaching endurance, observation, and resilience in ways you never anticipated. By now, you've internalized the rhythms of shipboard life. The days are long, the nights restless, but the patterns, the repetition of work, meals, superstition, and survival, offer a strange predictability. You find solace in knowing what comes next, even if the next task is grueling or the next storm threatening. Your body bears the marks of the voyage. Calloused hands, blistered feet, and stiff joints remind you of every rope pulled, every sail hoisted, every deck scrubbed. Yet there's pride too, a quiet acknowledgement of endurance. You've adapted to the discomfort, learned to anticipate danger, and mastered a fraction of the ship's endless complexities. Historians still debate whether such endurance was innate or trained, but you know firsthand that it's a mixture of both. Food and sleep remain imperfect, but you've learned strategies to cope. Hardtack becomes more tolerable when softened in beer or broken into manageable pieces. Hammocks, once unbearable, now cradle your body with a rhythm you've come to recognize. Even pests, rats, lice, and fleas lose some of their terror through familiarity. You coexist, if not comfortably, at least without constant panic. Superstitions, once seemingly absurd, now feel like tools. Observing rituals, carrying charms, and whispering small prayers bring psychological comfort. Whether or not they truly influence luck is irrelevant. The rituals steady your nerves, creating a layer of perceived control over the unpredictable ocean. Camaraderie is your anchor. Bonds forged in shared hardship are stronger than any formal alliance. You rely on fellow sailors for support, guidance, and companionship. Their jokes, stories, and even shared complaints offer respite. Life aboard is relentless, but these connections turn endurance into something bearable. Encounters with land, other ships, and wildlife punctuate the monotony, providing glimpses of beauty, danger, and opportunity. Every port teaches negotiation, observation, and adaptation. Every sighting of a distant ship or a school of leaping fish reinforces the lessons of vigilance and humility. You realize the ocean is both teacher and test, rewarding skill and punishing carelessness. By the end of your journey, you are transformed. The sailor you were at the start, green, naive, and constantly overwhelmed, has been reshaped by necessity. Pain, exhaustion, and fear coexist, with brief moments of awe, humor, and accomplishment. You've survived not just by strength, but by patience, observation, and clever adaptation. And so you stand at the rail one evening, wind tousling your hair, looking out over the endless horizon. The sun dips low, painting the waves gold and crimson. You take a deep breath, acknowledging every hardship endured, every lesson learned. The voyage continues and you are ready, weathered, wary, but still standing. Weeks turn into months, and the world beyond the sea begins to feel like a distant dream. The routines that once felt oppressive now define your existence. You rise before dawn, guided by the faint gray light creeping over the horizon, and move through the day with practiced precision. The motions are almost automatic, adjusting sails, checking knots, cleaning decks, but each carries a quiet sense of mastery. You've become part of the ship, and it, in turn, has shaped you. The sea itself seems to test your resolve. Some days it lies calm and glassy, reflecting the sky like polished metal. Other days, it roars with such fury that every creak of the hull feels like a threat. You've learned to read its moods, to sense shifts in the wind before they strike, and to respect its indifference. The ocean neither forgives nor favors, it simply is. Letters from home, if they ever arrive, are fragments of another life. The handwriting feels familiar yet foreign, describing seasons and faces you can barely remember. You read them slowly, more for the rhythm of the words than their meaning, then tuck them away as talismans of a world that feels both comforting and unreachable. The crew changes too. New faces replace the lost or the left behind, and each man carries his own story of escape, debt, or hope. Together you form a fragile community bound by duty and survival. You learn to predict each sailor's habits, the one who hums before dawn, the one who whispers prayers at the mast, the one who laughs too loudly after rum. Their quirks fill the silence that the sea leaves behind. There are moments of strange beauty that break through the monotony. Phosphorescent waves shimmer at night like scattered stars. Whales surface beside the ship, their vast shadows gliding beneath the water. Sometimes, when the air is still and the sky impossibly wide, you feel suspended between two worlds, the one above and the one below, each as vast and unknowable as the other. Illness, though less frequent now, still lurks in the corners of the hold. The smell of tar and salt can't fully mask the odor of sweat, damp wood, and the occasional rot. Yet, even these discomforts have become part of the rhythm of life. You no longer recoil, you simply endure. In rare, quiet moments, you catch yourself wondering what awaits beyond the voyage. Will the land still feel steady underfoot? Will you recognize your own reflection, or has the sea carved a new version of you entirely? These questions linger without answer, carried away by the wind. And as another sunset bleeds across the horizon, you realize something profound. The ship is no longer just a vessel. It's become your world. The land you left behind has turned to memory, and the ocean, once your greatest fear, has become your constant companion. The journey has changed you beyond return. The voyage stretches onward, and though the days blur together, a quiet confidence settles among the crew. You no longer question your place here. The ropes that once burned your palms now fit comfortably in your grip, and every order shouted across the deck is answered with instinct rather than hesitation. The sea, unpredictable as ever, feels less like an enemy and more like a stern teacher whose lessons you've finally begun to understand. Storms still come, fierce and unrelenting. Lightning rips across the sky and waves slam against the hull with bone-shaking force. But where fear once ruled, focus now takes its place. You know how to brace, how to move, how to keep your footing when chaos erupts. Even the youngest deckhands follow your lead, watching how you steady the lines or secure a flapping sail in the dark. Experience, once earned through pain, has become your armor. When calm returns, the ship feels almost holy in its stillness. The deck glows in the afternoon sun, and the air smells of salt and resin. Sailors lounge near the rails, mending clothes or carving trinkets from scraps of wood. Laughter rises easily now, carried by the breeze. These brief respites, you realize, are as important as the work itself. Moments where humanity breathes between trials. There are reminders, though, that danger never fully fades. A sudden illness, a snapped line, or a careless misstep can shift the mood in an instant. Death is a quiet passenger aboard every voyage, rarely seen but always present. Yet, with time, even grief becomes part of the rhythm. You learn to honor the fallen without losing yourself to sorrow. At night, the stars return as they always do, brilliant and ancient. You trace familiar constellations and remember how they guided sailors long before your time. The sky becomes a map of endurance, proof that though the ocean changes with every wind and tide, some things remain constant. You find comfort in that thought. As weeks pass, a distant coastline appears one morning, faint and hazy against the horizon. The cry of land ripples through the crew, and an electric energy fills the air. For the first time in months, you smell earth, damp, rich, and alive. It hits you harder than expected, stirring something deep inside. The sea has shaped you, but the sight of land reminds you that the journey was never meant to last forever. You stand at the bow as the ship draws closer, sunlight warming your face, the wind tugging at your hair. Behind you lies the expanse of everything you've endured. Ahead waits a shore both familiar and strange. You breathe deeply, feeling the steady pulse of the waves beneath your feet. Whatever comes next, you know you'll face it as you face the sea, steady, scarred, and unbroken. Land grows nearer with each passing hour, its outline sharpening against the morning haze. The crew buzzes with restless anticipation, some laughing, others quietly lost in thought. You can almost feel the collective heartbeat of the ship quicken. After endless months surrounded by nothing but waves and sky, the solid line of coast feels like a promise of rest, of reunion, of change. As the ship enters shallower waters, the scent of salt begins to mingle with earth and foliage. Seabirds circle overhead, their cries sharp and unfamiliar after so long without them. The captain stands firm at the helm, issuing crisp commands as sailors rush to lower sails and ready the anchor. Every movement feels ritualistic, a closing act to a long and grueling chapter. When the anchor finally drops with a deep, echoing splash, silence follows. For a moment, no one moves. Then the realization hits. The voyage is truly ending. Cheers break out, rough voices cracking with emotion. Some sailors kneel and murmur quick prayers, while others simply stare toward the shore, eyes glinting in disbelief. Stepping onto the dock feels unreal. The ground is steady but strange beneath your boots, as though it might start swaying at any moment. The smell of tar, smoke, and wet wood fills the air. Locals approach, traders, dock workers, children, and you feel both foreign and familiar at once. The world you left has continued without you, yet you've changed in ways it cannot see. The town ahead hums with life. Market stalls spill over with fresh produce, voices rise and fall in rhythm, and the colors seem impossibly vivid after months of muted sea tones. You move through it all slowly, absorbing every sound, every scent. Even the chaos feels beautiful. That night, in a small tavern near the harbor, the crew gathers for what might be the last time. Tankards clink, songs rise, and stories of storms and stars fill the air. You laugh until your ribs ache, but beneath the joy is a quiet ache, an understanding that this chapter is closing. The sea, for all its cruelty, has become part of you. Later, when the celebration fades and the night grows still, you step outside. The tide whispers softly against the pier, the same voice that once terrified and taught you. You look out toward the dark horizon where sea meets sky, knowing that it will call you again someday. And when it does, you'll answer, not as the same person who first boarded, but as one remade by wind, salt, and endurance. Days turn into weeks on land, but the rhythm of the sea never fully leaves you. You wake before dawn, expecting the creak of timbers or the captain's shout, only to find stillness. Your body sways unconsciously, as if compensating for a deck that no longer moves. Even sleep feels strange. Too quiet, too soft, too secure. The earth is steady, but your mind keeps reaching for the roll of waves. The others scatter, some to families, others to new ships, a few to taverns where they drink away the silence. You stay behind for a while, caught between two worlds. The noise of the market feels overwhelming after months of sea wind and open sky. The faces, the colors, the smells, they're all too vivid, too fast. You realize how the voyage has changed your senses, sharpening some, numbing others. You find work repairing sails near the docks, unable to stray far from the water. The routine is quieter but familiar. Stitching torn canvas, patching rope, watching ships come and go. Sometimes you catch sight of a vessel readying for departure, and a deep ache stirs within you. You tell yourself you've earned the right to rest, yet part of you longs for the uncertainty, the wild rhythm of the ocean. At night you walk along the shoreline. The waves break gently against the sand, a far cry from the storms you survived, yet their sound still holds power. You trace the constellations overhead, the same ones that once guided your ship, and remember nights spent staring at those same stars from a heaving deck. The memories come not as fear, but as quiet recognition. You begin to understand what the sea truly gave you, not just endurance, but perspective. It stripped life down to essentials: food, warmth, companionship, and the fragile boundary between safety and loss. It taught patience, humility, and the strange peace that comes from knowing how little control humans truly have. When you meet new sailors preparing to set out, they remind you of yourself at the beginning, eager, untested, unaware of what lies ahead. You offer advice sparingly, knowing that some lessons can't be spoken, only lived. You watch them sail off one morning, the ship shrinking against the horizon, and feel both envy and pride. Back in your small room overlooking the harbor, you write a few lines in a worn journal, nothing grand, just fragments of memory. Salt still lingers in your skin, and the faint sound of the tide filters through the window. You close your eyes, and for a moment, it feels like you're back on deck, wind in your hair, horizon stretching endlessly ahead. The sea, though distant, will never stop whispering your name. Years pass, yet the memory of the voyage refuses to fade. The sea has etched itself into you, its rhythm, its danger, its beauty. Even far from the shore, you feel its pull in the quiet moments. The sound of wind through trees, the scent of rain, the way light dances on still water. You've lived through storms and silence alike, and both shaped you in ways you're only beginning to understand. You find yourself drawn to the docks more often than not. Old sailors still gather there, their faces lined with the same weather that once carved yours. They share stories that blend truth and myth, just as you once did, keeping the old traditions alive for anyone willing to listen. Some speak of monsters beneath the waves, others of ghost ships or cursed winds. You listen quietly, smiling, because you know the sea doesn't need legends to be fearsome. It's already alive with its own will. In time, younger sailors begin to seek you out. They ask what it was like, how to endure, how to find courage when the world tilts and breaks. You tell them the same thing you once learned the hard way, that strength isn't about defying the sea, but surviving with it. You speak of patience, of small joys amid hardship, of the strange beauty that lives inside danger. They listen, some wide-eyed, some skeptical, all hungry for the truth behind the tales. At home, your journal grows heavier with ink and memory. You sketch ships, storms, constellations, sometimes clumsy drawings, sometimes vivid enough to bring the past rushing back. You write not to be remembered, but to preserve what the sea taught you before time smooths the edges of experience. Seasons change, and the harbor shifts with them. Ships come and go, carrying men and dreams you'll never know. You stand on the pier one evening, watching the sun sink into the horizon, and feel the same quiet awe you did on your first voyage. The sea is eternal, vast and indifferent, but to those who've faced it, it's also intimate, almost sacred. You realize that every sailor leaves something behind in its depths. Sweat, fear, laughter, fragments of stories carried by the wind. Your own part is small, a single thread in a tapestry that stretches across centuries. And yet, it matters, because the sea remembers in its own way, through waves that never cease, tides that always return, and the endless rhythm that mirrors a heartbeat. As night falls, you turn from the water and walk home slowly, the sound of the tide following like a familiar companion. You've lived your story, endured its tempests, and learned its quiet truths. The sea will always call, but now you know how to answer, with calm acceptance and gratitude for having sailed at all. The years do not dull the lessons of the sea. You carry them quietly, woven into your daily life. Discipline, patience, and the constant awareness of forces beyond your control. Even simple tasks at home or in the market feel measured, guided by rhythms learned aboard ship. You notice the smallest details, from a shifting wind to a sudden shadow, with the same vigilance that once kept you alive on rolling decks. Occasionally, you return to the harbor. Ships still line the docks, sails flapping, ropes creaking, sailors shouting over the din. You watch newcomers prepare to leave, their faces bright with excitement and fear. Some stumble, some falter, some succeed. You offer advice quietly, stories of storms, survival, and the subtle art of reading the sea. You know that no words can fully prepare them, but guidance eases the journey in small, meaningful ways. In quieter moments, memories rise unbidden. The stench of the lower decks, the bite of salt spray on skin, the camaraderie and shared toil, and the thrill of a rare, perfect sunrise at sea. These memories are neither entirely bitter nor wholly sweet. They are real, layered, and enduring. You recognize the contrast between the chaos of the voyage and the serenity of recollection, and it offers its own form of peace. You reflect on transformation, realizing that endurance is not just physical, but deeply mental and moral. The sea taught humility, courage, and respect, not only for nature but for human limits and the value of cooperation. You recall the bonds formed, the moments of levity amid hardship, the superstitions that provided comfort, and the small rituals that anchored life amid uncertainty. Each was a lesson in resilience. Finally, you sense that the voyage never truly ends. The sea, in its vastness, continues to shape those who encounter it, while its stories ripple outward, carried in the hearts of sailors, chronicled in journals, and whispered in ports far from home. You leave the harbor for the last time, carrying not just memories, but the quiet knowledge that survival and adaptation are timeless, that endurance transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary, and that the lessons learned on the rolling waves will outlast any storm. Years pass, and the sea becomes both memory and myth. You settle on land, yet its pull never truly fades. The scent of brine on a breeze, the cry of distant gulls, or the creak of a wooden cart can stir something deep inside you. A reminder of horizons that once defined your world. Though your hands no longer grasp ropes or haul sails, they still move with the instinctive care of one trained to balance between wind and wave. You find yourself teaching others without realizing it. In conversation, in the quiet patience with which you mend a net or carve a piece of driftwood, the discipline of the voyage shows. Children gather to hear your stories, wide-eyed at the mention of storms, strange lands, and glowing seas. Some tales you soften, others you leave unfinished, understanding that mystery gives them life. You speak not to glorify the hardships, but to honor what endurance truly means, to face what cannot be controlled and still find beauty within it. On certain evenings you walk along the shore. The tide whispers in a language you still understand, and the horizon glows with the same faint promise it once held. You pause, tracing the waves' retreat, and think of those who never returned, faces blurred by time, names that linger like faint echoes. Their memory is a quiet vow you carry, a testament to lives lived in service of survival, discovery, and the stubborn pursuit of meaning. Your world now is smaller, steadier, but the lessons of the sea thread through every act. You tend your garden as though trimming sails. You read the wind before storms as though adjusting a mast. The rhythm of the ocean beats beneath the surface of daily life. And though your voyage has long since ended, part of you is forever adrift, following invisible currents of thought and memory. When you finally look to the horizon one last time, it feels less like an ending and more like recognition, a return to the vastness that once shaped you. The sea, eternal and indifferent, reflects the sun in golden shards, as if acknowledging your endurance. You smile faintly, the salt still on your lips, knowing that no matter how far you've traveled, a sailor's heart always belongs to the water. The final chapter of your life feels quieter, but not empty. The restlessness that once drove you to the horizon has softened into reflection. You rise early, as you did at sea, guided not by a captain's call, but by habit and memory. The world around you moves at a slower rhythm, fields instead of tides, wind in trees instead of canvas, but your heart still measures time by the roll of invisible waves. Sometimes you dream of the ship. You see the deck slick with rain, the lanterns swaying in the dark, the murmured prayers before a storm. You wake before dawn, the scent of salt still vivid, as if the sea has never truly released you. Yet there is peace in this haunting, a recognition that the ocean was never an enemy, only a mirror reflecting the parts of you forged by endurance and fear. Visitors still come, eager to hear your stories. They sit close as you describe the rhythm of the oars, the creak of ropes, and the strange calm that follows survival. You notice how their faces light up when you speak of beauty, the gleam of moonlight on waves, the laughter of shipmates, the first sight of land after endless days. You tell them that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to keep working through it, one tide at a time. In your final years, you build a small model ship, each plank carved by hand, each sail cut from worn cloth. It sits on your table, a memory captured in miniature, as delicate and imperfect as life itself. When you finish it, you place a small coin beside the mast, just as sailors once did for luck. Old habits linger, even in stillness. As twilight comes, you sit by the shore once more. The waves lap gently, the same song they've sung for centuries. You close your eyes and breathe deeply, the wind cool, the air heavy with salt. Somewhere in that rhythm, you feel the pull of the sea again. You smile, not with longing, but with gratitude. You have journeyed far, endured much, and learned that the sea never truly leaves those who have known it. When the sun dips below the horizon, it feels less like departure and more like return. An old sailor finally home, not to land or sea, but to peace. Years pass after your final voyage, yet your story continues to ripple through the world like waves after a passing ship. The younger sailors still speak your name in hushed tones, sometimes as a lesson, sometimes as a legend. They tell of the storms you faced, the monsters you doubted, the patience you learned when courage alone was not enough. Every retelling changes slightly, as stories do, but the heart remains. The tale of one who endured the sea and found wisdom in its cruelty. Old shipmates, those who still live, remember you differently. To them, you were not a myth, but a companion, a steady hand on the rope, a quiet voice in the dark, someone who shared their fear and laughter without pretense. When they meet in distant ports or quiet taverns, they raise a cup in your honor, smiling at memories half faded by time, but sharpened by affection. In the archives of some coastal city, a scholar preserves fragments of your journal. The ink has faded, the parchment stained with age and salt, yet the words still breathe with the rhythm of the sea. They study your entries not just for history, but for something deeper, for the glimpse they offer into what it means to live in constant motion between survival and surrender. Children gather by the docks to hear your story from the old storytellers. They listen wide-eyed as the ocean glows beyond them, and though they cannot yet understand the weight of your journey, something in their hearts stirs. Perhaps one day they too will chase the horizon, guided by echoes of your voice carried on the wind. And so your memory drifts, not fixed in stone, but living in the hearts of those who sail after you. Like the tide, your story returns again and again, reshaped but never lost. The sea remembers every name, every sacrifice, every small act of endurance. In that endless rhythm, you are not gone. You are part of the song that rises with each dawn, a whisper in the wind that fills the sails of every ship that dares the horizon. Seasons turn, empires shift, and still the sea remains unchanged. The harbors that once welcomed your ship now bustle with new vessels, sleeker, faster, manned by sailors who know your story only as a half-remembered legend. Yet traces of your time endure. The old ropes in the dockyard still smell faintly of tar and salt. The tavern where you once sat still echoes with shanties about distant storms and lost comrades. In quiet moments, the ocean mirrors the sky so perfectly that it feels like a boundary between worlds. Some say that when the waves are calm and the wind falls still, your spirit can be felt there, watching, guiding, or perhaps simply resting. A few claim to have seen your likeness in the shimmer of the horizon, a figure standing against the dying light, calm and unafraid. The world changes faster now. Charts are redrawn, new lands are claimed, and the art of sailing becomes more precise, less uncertain. Yet, even with their instruments and maps, modern sailors still whisper old blessings before they depart. They still toss a coin to the sea, still murmur the names of those who came before. Without realizing it, they honor you, and all who lived by the mercy of wind and water. Somewhere in the hold of memory, your story settles into something timeless. It becomes not just the tale of one sailor's endurance, but a reflection of the human spirit itself, the will to voyage into the unknown, to face fear and wonder in equal measure, and to return changed. And when storms rage across the deep, when lightning flashes over black waves, there are those who swear they hear a voice carried in the gale. A voice steady and familiar, whispering the same quiet truth that guided you long ago. The sea takes, the sea teaches, and the sea remembers. Years later, when you walk along the docks of a familiar port, you notice the young sailors moving with a mixture of eagerness and trepidation. Their eyes widen at the first glimpse of a towering mast, Their hands tremble as they secure ropes, and their voices carry both excitement and fear. You recognize yourself in them, once green, once uncertain, once wholly at the mercy of the waves. You offer guidance when asked, a steady hand on a knot, a quiet word of advice, a reminder to respect the wind as much as the captain. And yet you do not intervene in every mistake. Experience has taught you that some lessons must be learned in the heat of challenge, through scraped knees, soaked clothes, or a night spent shivering under the stars. Stories flow easily now. You recount storms that seemed insurmountable, friendships forged in the grip of fear, and moments of absurd levity that kept despair at bay. The young listen intently, eyes wide, mouths slightly open, as if they can taste the salt on the wind and feel the wood under their fingers. They do not just hear the tale, they live it in imagination, and for a brief moment the years melt away. You realize that your journey has created echoes, small ripples that will travel long after you have returned to quieter harbors. Your story, once your own, now belongs to the crew, to the port, to the many who will venture into the unknown and emerge transformed. In teaching them, you see the full circle of the sea's lessons: endurance, observation, humility, and the stubborn spark of hope that keeps sailors moving forward, wave after wave. The sun had barely risen when you stepped onto the deck, the chill of the morning air biting at your skin and ruffling the edges of your worn coat. Even after years at sea, the dawn always carried a quiet promise, a reminder that each day, no matter how grueling, began with possibility. The sea stretched endlessly before you, its surface a mirror of molten gold from the first hesitant rays, punctuated here and there by the dark ripple of an approaching swell. You inhaled, savoring the salt-laden air that had been your companion for so long. For a moment, the years of hardship seemed to fade, leaving only the rhythm of the waves and the creak of the rigging beneath your fingers. Below deck, the crew stirred slowly. The hammock swung gently, carrying men in varying states of consciousness, some already awake and quietly checking ropes, others still wrapped in tattered blankets, faces drawn from fatigue and dreams. The low murmur of voices, mingled with the occasional cough or the scrape of boots against worn planks, created a strange symphony, an ongoing testament to life aboard. Years ago, this sound might have been oppressive, a constant reminder of confinement. Now it carried the strange comfort of familiarity, a pulse you understood as intimately as your own heartbeat. You made your way to the rail, gripping the smooth, worn wood that had been polished by countless hands before yours. Below, the water shimmered in shades of green and blue, waves breaking against the hull with measured force. The rhythm was hypnotic, the ebb and flow as predictable as your own breathing. You watched as a small group of dolphins leaped near the bow, their bodies arcing through the spray before slipping beneath the surface. For the first time in years, you felt a spark of unguarded awe. The ocean was vast, unpredictable, and dangerous. Yet it had a beauty that could be breathtaking if one took the time to notice. As the sun climbed higher, activity on deck grew. Sailors scurried to adjust sails, haul ropes, and ensure that every line, every plank, every piece of equipment was in order. You observed them with a quiet attentiveness, noting the precision in their movements, the subtle gestures of coordination that could make the difference between smooth passage and disaster. It was in these details, the tilt of a shoulder, the angle of a foot, the call and response of voices across the deck, that the language of the sea spoke most clearly. Experience had taught you that survival depended as much on observation and subtlety as on strength and endurance. A sudden gust of wind filled the sails, snapping a line with a sharp crack that reverberated across the deck. A sailor caught the rope just in time, muscles straining, and you felt that familiar thrill of adrenaline, the recognition that for all your familiarity with the ocean, its power was still immediate and raw. You shouted an order to steady the boom, your voice carrying above the wind, instinct guiding your tone and cadence. The men responded, moving with practiced urgency, and within moments, chaos had been contained. The lesson was subtle but clear. In the face of the sea's caprice, vigilance and decisive action were the only allies that could truly be trusted. Later, as the deck settled into a rhythm once more, you found a rare moment to move among the crew, observing their quirks and habits that had persisted through years of voyages. Some still clutched charms tied to belts or hidden in shirts, small tokens against unseen forces. Others murmured prayers under their breath, subtle acknowledgements to gods, saints, or the sea itself. The rituals no longer surprised you. You had participated in many, half-heartedly at first, but gradually with understanding. They were not merely superstition, they were tools, tiny anchors of control in a world dominated by waves, wind, and uncertainty. You paused by the galley, noting the smoke curling from the small hearth, where the cook prepared a meager breakfast of salted meat, hardtack, and occasionally dried fruit. Even after all this time, the scent of cooking mixed with salt and tar carried a strange comfort. A reminder that sustenance, however basic, was essential not only for survival, but for maintaining the delicate equilibrium of morale. You watched as men argued briefly over portions and utensils, voices rising and falling like the tide, only to dissolve into shared laughter moments later. Such moments, fleeting though they were, reminded you that life at sea was as much about human connection as it was about facing the elements. By midday, the sun had fully asserted itself in the sky, casting sharp shadows across the deck. You ascended to the crow's nest, climbing the rigging with the ease of years of repetition. From this vantage, the horizon stretched infinitely, a pale band where sky and water met, dotted occasionally by distant sails or the dark sheen of an approaching storm. Here, high above the familiar chaos of the deck, you felt both a sense of isolation and a heightened awareness of the world. The ocean's vastness was humbling, yet your understanding of its patterns, currents, and moods offered a kind of mastery. You traced lines of wind across the waves with your eyes, anticipating shifts and gusts, making mental notes that could prove essential should the weather turn. Hours passed in this quiet vigilance, punctuated only by the calls of gulls or the distant thunder of surf against unseen rocks. You allowed yourself brief reflections, thinking back to your first months at sea, the terror of storms, the relentless discipline, the biting cold, and the unyielding sun. Every hardship had left its mark, every mistake had been a lesson, and every fleeting moment of joy, a song, a laugh, a sunset, had been savored as if it were a treasure. You realized that the sailor you had once been, untested and uncertain, had been reshaped by necessity into someone capable of endurance, observation, and adaptation. Descending from the crow's nest, you rejoined the crew, offering advice, sharing stories, and occasionally guiding a hand in knot tying or sail adjustment. The young sailors looked to you with a mixture of curiosity and respect, their eyes wide as they absorbed your instructions. You felt a quiet pride in their attentiveness, recognizing the continuity of knowledge that spanned generations of mariners. Experience, once an elusive and personal possession, was now a shared resource, a living inheritance passed through voice, gesture, and example. As evening approached, the light softened into amber and rose, painting the water in streaks of fire and gold. The deck was quieter now, the rhythm of work giving way to small tasks, cleaning, securing lines, and preparing hammocks. You found a moment to stand at the rail, feeling the wind tousle your hair, listening to the gentle slap of waves against the hull. The horizon seemed impossibly distant, the sky both expansive and intimate, as if the ocean itself held its breath in the fading light. You allowed yourself to remember the countless dawns and dusks that had passed. The storm survived, the camaraderie forged, the moments of terror, levity, and awe that had punctuated your journey. Night settled with a velvet darkness, pierced only by the faint glimmer of stars and the occasional lantern swung across the deck by a passing sailor. Below, hammocks swayed gently, men murmuring in dreams filled with remembered ports, storms, or home. You moved among them quietly, checking lines and securing loose equipment, aware that even the calmest night carried potential danger. Each creak, each shadow, each shift of wind reminded you that vigilance, though exhausting, was never entirely abandoned. Finding your own hammock, you paused to look at the moon rising over the water, its pale light casting silver streaks across the waves. You reflected on the strange duality of life at sea, its blend of terror and beauty, isolation and camaraderie, discipline and freedom. The lessons of years weighed on you lightly, a mixture of fatigue and wisdom, and you felt the quiet satisfaction of endurance. Here, in this small, swaying cocoon of canvas and rope, you allowed yourself to close your eyes, to drift between wakefulness and sleep, feeling the ship's rhythm align with your own. Dreams came slowly, often fragmented, images of distant lands, faces of comrades, storms both survived and imagined, and the faint echo of music and laughter carried from long nights on deck. In these visions, the boundaries of time and space blurred, and you realized that the sea had claimed not only your body, but your mind, teaching patience, reflection, and a profound awareness of the fleeting nature of human effort. Yet even in dreams the lessons persisted. Observe, endure, anticipate, and above all, remain adaptable. Morning arrived again with a soft mist curling over the water. The cycle continued, unbroken, as if the ocean itself measured the passage of time, indifferent yet instructive. You rose with practiced precision, performing small rituals, a silent prayer, a check of lines, a tightening of straps, a glance at the horizon. The routine, though repetitive, offered structure, a fragile framework in the chaos of wind and waves. Each small act became both a necessity and a meditation, a way to claim agency in a world dictated by forces larger than any individual sailor. By midday, the harbor of a distant port appeared, faint on the horizon. Excitement stirred among the crew, tempered by caution and experience. Years at sea had taught you that land, though seemingly safe, brought its own hazards, thieves, misunderstandings, and the unpredictability of foreign customs. Yet the sight of docks, spires, and cobbled streets evoked a complex mix of relief and curiosity. You guided the crew in preparations to dock, adjusting sails, securing cargo, and offering advice on etiquette learned from countless ports. As the ship glided into the harbor, you observed the vibrant life of the town, the merchants calling, the children darting between feet, the aromas of unfamiliar spices and cooking fires drifting across the quay. You felt the duality of the voyage ends and the ship slows as land draws near. You look back at the endless sea you've survived, feeling the weight of storms, labor, and fears overcome. Lessons learned, bonds formed, and rituals practiced now feel like part of you. The journey has tested patience, courage, and endurance, leaving you transformed, seasoned, wary but standing, ready for whatever lies beyond the horizon.